The kids are outside on the trampoline playing, and we're just gonna kind of have an outdoor day today, and I might sit down at my computer in a little while and start doing some planning for my fall garden because it's about time to order seeds for that and get that going. I really want to try to start my own seeds this fall, so that's like a whole other thing I've got to tackle, and so I might sit down and do that this afternoon after breakfast time. So I've got my cup of coffee here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put together some biscuits, and I'm gonna make a milk gravy. And I don't have any buttermilk for my biscuits, but I did have some kefir, so I'm gonna try that. I know that I've done like my lemon kefir muffins before, which are amazing, and I swapped out buttermilk for kefir in that recipe and it worked well. So, I mean, you don't really get the probiotics because it's gonna be cooked, but if you don't have it, like if you don't have buttermilk in your house, then you can just use kefir. So I'm gonna use kefir. I've got some honey. I'm gonna do my fresh whole grain flour. So I'm gonna try making whole grain biscuits. I haven't done this before, but we're gonna see how it goes. And then just some baking powder and some salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this together for breakfast and then make a really quick, like 5-minute milk gravy. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with 2 cups of whole grain flour. And this is actually an einkorn flour that I'm using right now. Okay, then I'm gonna do a tablespoon of baking powder. Maybe just a hair more. And then 1 teaspoon of my Celtic sea salt. Okay, and I'm gonna whisk that together first. Ooh, I spilled. Now I'm gonna grate in 1 stick of butter. And I'm just gonna grate it directly into my flour. And you wanna use cold butter for biscuits. You can also pop your stick of butter in the freezer for a few minutes before you make biscuits, but if you don't, it's normally just fine. I love, instead of breaking out my food processor on busy days where I don't want to dirty up like a million different gadgets and stuff, I just love using my box grater and just grating it straight in, because then you don't have to spend your time kind of like using the, what's it called? Not a biscuit cutter, but the thing that cuts in the butter for like a pie crust or your food processor. You can just use your grater, and I love it because I can just pop it in the dishwasher and it just makes it really easy to make biscuits and get it on the table for breakfast. So I'm just gonna pop this in here. Okay, so now my butter is all grated up. And I want to break that up and start getting it coated in flour so that way it doesn't stick to each other as much. The flour kind of helps it separate. So I just use my hand and I just kind of break it up with my hand, just like that. And I'm gonna put the tablespoon of honey in my kefir so that it's all mixed together. That way it's evenly distributed. I just like a little bit of sweetness, and it's really good to add honey in because you taste it with the butter after you butter your biscuits, and so it's like a really delicious like honey butter. Just that smells so good. It almost smells like our smoothies we do. Okay, yeah, that's perfect. It's coming into a ball. And I don't know if I said it, but I'm using I used in between 3/4 of a cup and 1 cup of kefir because I wasn't sure how wet I would need it to be since I'm using an einkorn flour. It absorbs liquids a little bit differently, but I think this is perfect. So I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit of flour down. And I'm not gonna roll this out with a rolling pin. I'm just gonna kind of gently press it together and then flatten it out. Because we want it to be light and fluffy. So, there we go. And then just press it out about 1 inch thick. And I'm not making these perfect today. It's just gonna be covered in my milk gravy anyway. So, we're just gonna make these nice and rustic. Okay, and I do have little cookie cutters, but they're above my fridge and I'm not even gonna use that today. I'm just gonna grab, I think, a jar. So if you don't have a biscuit cutter, you can just use a nice wide mouth or narrow mouth mason jar. Probably get 4 more out of these maybe. Go ahead and flour my jar again. Nice, okay. So I have, let's see how many I have. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 biscuits, and I'm gonna press this last one into another one, I think, and we'll see how that one turns out. It's not gonna be as beautiful, but I don't wanna waste. So there we go. So I'm gonna go ahead and preheat my oven to about, I think 425. I'm gonna do it in my Breville Smart Oven air fryer and do it in there. So I usually do that a little bit lower because it tends to wanna cook it a little bit faster. So I'm gonna put it in there at 425 and I'm gonna line a baking sheet with some of my unbleached parchment paper and pop these on there. And then while they're in the oven, I'll just quickly whip together that milk gravy. What are you doing?
I'll do it on the course.
White gravy is one of those things that when you make it, it just instantly has this special feeling like this is a special meal, a special breakfast, and it's something I don't actually make often, but when I do, it makes me want to keep making it again. And I love just plain white gravy or white gravy with sausage in it. They're both just really delicious and hearty and makes the kids feel like this is going to be a special day. So all you need to do is just melt about 1/4 cup of butter and throw in about 1/4 cup of just white flour and mix that together and make a little roux. And then after that, you're just going to add in a little bit of salt to give it flavor. And I just like to cook this down for a few minutes to really cook out some of that white flour taste. And then I like to add in fresh black pepper because it gives it that peppery, like sawmill gravy, I think maybe is what it's called. I do that, and then I'll just add in about 2 cups of whole milk, and you can use full fat milk here. It's delicious and thick and creamy, and then that's it. I just let that simmer for a few minutes and it thickens and it'll coat the back of your spoon, and then I just serve that gravy on my whole grain biscuits fresh out of the oven. We all really enjoy meals like this, especially on the weekend. Maybe it's Saturday morning and I make this, and I definitely need to remember to make this again as we head into the fall. After breakfast, the kids will usually go outside for a few minutes and kind of get some energy out for the day and just get some sunshine in. And I usually go with them and I'll work in the garden. But today, since I had to get some seed organization done, I went ahead and I made myself a cup of black tea with some half and half in it. And I'm just going to sit down at my computer for a little while and try to kind of organize things and think about what I want to be doing this fall in the garden.
So right now I'm just kind of taking inventory on what seeds I have and what seeds I'm gonna need later on this year for the fall garden, because I wanna make sure that I have plenty of seeds to start. There's one from Baker Creek, heirloom seeds. I wanna purchase more heirloom seeds because I wanna be able to start seed saving, because it would be really beneficial if I'm not just buying seeds every year and relying on that, but actually saving the seeds myself.
It's taken me a little while to kind of learn my gardening style, but I think my gardening style goes hand in hand with my cooking style, which is just simple whole foods. And so I like to kind of keep a kitchen garden where I succession plant and constantly have things coming in from the garden that I can store or just eat fresh. I don't even necessarily have to preserve it. I could just simply freeze it or leave it on the shelf in my fridge for a few months and it will last. So I'm definitely going to be planting things with that in mind moving forward, along with just beautiful things to kind of fill it out and help those bees and pollinators come into my garden and just make a beautiful space in my backyard.
I have so many I need to go through and see how many I actually have, what things I've grown before, what things I actually like. I'm not actually sure how to choose seeds and narrow it down. There's so many I want. How do you narrow down which seeds you get? Because there's so many different varieties. I want stuff that grows well in my climate, but then I also want things that are just beautiful to grow. So it's like, I think this year we're just gonna end up having a lot of seeds and we'll just have plenty for next year, I guess, because sometimes I start things and they don't even germinate. So I wanna make sure that I have plenty on hand, just so if something doesn't work out, I can go ahead and pick another variety and get going with that. And we've got a few big things happening in our backyard pretty soon that I'm excited about that will enable me to do that better. So today I'm gonna be doing just some of my everyday homemaking. So it's the time of year where I'm outside in my garden a lot. I'm weeding, I'm pruning, I'm harvesting all of that and bringing that inside to wash it and prepare it. And then of course the kids aren't in school right now, and so there's plenty of snacks that I need to take care of and just a lot of things to keep my kitchen and home running. And it happens nearly every day. Like I feel like the same things just keep happening, but it's still just a great season of life and I really enjoy it and want to share it with you guys. And so one of the things I'm going to be doing today that is kind of a prepping for the fall time, which is my favorite time of year, is making an elderberry tincture. So in the fall time, I love to make things like elderberry syrup, whether we're just preventing a sickness or if we're actually sick. So I'll take like a spoonful of elderberry syrup, which is like honey and elderberries, and stir that into a cup of tea, or just take a spoonful of it on its own, and that's really medicinal and healing. But then if we're sick, like especially especially me and my husband, if we're sick and coming down with a cold or flu, then I like to take a little bit of elderberry tincture every hour or two, and it seems to knock a lot of things out. So I'm gonna go ahead and make that today. I'm gonna be using dried elderberries because I don't have access to fresh elderberries right now. So if you don't either, you can pick some of these up. I'll leave a few different sources linked down below, but they're basically just dried organic elderberries. And so you can order these online, and then I'll show you guys how I'm gonna make this tincture. And I'm making it now in the summer because it has to sit for about 6 to 8 weeks before you can run it through a sieve and then store it in a little glass amber dropper bottle. And so I'm gonna go ahead and make that now and make sure that that's infusing into that alcohol so we have a nice medicinal herbal remedy going straight into the fall season. If you don't want to use alcohol in it, you could also use glycerin for like an alcohol-free version, but the measurements are going to be just a little bit different. So I'll leave a recipe for this down below. That way you can kind of see which one you want to do, but I'm going to use the one that's vodka today.
Elderberry tincture is incredibly easy to make, and it's also frugal too. It only takes 2 ingredients. So I'm using the dried elderberries, and then I think it's about an 80 or 85% proof vodka. And I'm just taking my glass jar and filling it about 1/4 of the way full with my dried elderberries, and then I'm gonna cover it up all the way up to the top pretty much with my vodka. And then we are just gonna let this sit in a dark area. I'm using my pantry, or you could use a cabinet, and we're just gonna let it sit for about 6 to 8 weeks while that medicinal elderberry just kind of infuses and all those properties are drawn out by the vodka. So I just give it a stir and I cover it with my airtight lid. I'm using a Weck jar, but you could use a mason jar. That would also work well, or even just like a glass Pyrex dish would probably work too. And this is just a really frugal and economic way to help keep your family healthy the natural way this fall. The next homemaking thing that I needed to get done today was just simply to mill some of my grain. So I'm using some soft white wheat here that I got from Azure Standard, and I'm putting it into the top of my Nutrimill. This is a Nutrimill Harvest grain mill, and I have the gold one. I'll leave a link down below. I do have an affiliate link to share with you guys, so if you want to use it, I'll leave it down below, and it just helps to support my channel. And I really love this product. I think it's one of the best mills on the market, and I love how easy it is. It's very beautiful on my countertop, and it works extremely well. So I like to use a soft white wheat grain because it's like the most soft and pastry-like flour. It's a very fine, white, soft flour. It's exactly what it sounds like. So I like to use this for my breads or for scones or biscuits or anything like that. And you can even sift it through a sieve in order to make it more of an all-purpose flour. But because it is such a soft wheat, I find that leaving it whole grain just like this works very well. So I'm just going to put it in this canister. And something else I've started doing is I've also been putting it in the freezer right after I mill it to keep all of those nutrients intact, because after you mill flour, the nutrients are still intact, but as it sits on the shelf, it will lose all of its nutrients. So even if you're buying good quality flour, if it's already milled, it's going to lose those nutrients. So I like to just store it in the freezer to just keep those nutrients intact for as long as possible. I am desperately trying to learn how to properly prune tomato plants. At first, when I began gardening, I didn't even realize you were supposed to prune them at all, so I just kind of let them do their thing, and they would develop these huge stems and not a lot of fruit. So what I've discovered is if you prune your tomatoes by pulling off some of the tubers that grow off of the side of the main V of the plant, then the plant is able to put more energy into fruit production instead of just growing a ton of greenery but not producing as much fruit. So I'm carefully trying to prune my tomatoes without making them completely shrivel up and die. For me, food and gardening go hand in hand. If I want good quality food, then the best way to get that food is usually from your own hands. And not only does it bring you incredible food, but it brings you incredible peace. There's something about working with my hands in this garden that is just a little taste of paradise, and I find myself wanting to spend more and more time out here, especially with my family.
So this tomato plant has completely gotten out of control, but I see a bunch of big heirloom tomatoes on here. I didn't properly prune this, and I really regret it now because I didn't realize this was going to be so huge, but I see buried in here a ton of tomatoes, so I'm going to go ahead and pick some of these really big ones in here.
Years ago, before my husband and I ever even got married, I dreamed of the days of going to the farmer's market and shopping for my family and having produce from my backyard and homeschooling my children. And now that I am here, I just want to tell you that what you put in your head really does matter. So today, as you're watching this video, I hope I can kind of empower you. Living a simple life, cooking real food that is good for your body and growing it too, homesteading or growing your own food, going back to your roots, is for everyone.
I'm also going to go ahead and make up a batch of my liquid fertilizer that I'm going to use on my tomatoes and my peppers. And for this, I normally use this thing with the pump, and then it has like a little sprayer where you can get right down into the root of the plant. But my kids, I think, actually use that little wand as a toy. And so I'm just going to put it in here, kind of swish it around and go dump some of this on my plants and fertilize those, give them a little food so that their production will be boosted. And for that, I like to use this Fish and Kelp blend. It's an organic liquid fertilizer, really natural. And so I just take some of this and blend it with like a gallon of water. You just need a little bit. And so far, so good. I can link it down below if you're interested in a fertilizer. I haven't tried that many other ones, but I do really like this, and it is organic. It also happens to smell really, really bad.